Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this video is about tips and strategies for the speaking test, and we're looking at part 2 specifically. So let's get on with it, shall we? And just to remind you of what you can expect in part 2. So you have 1 minute to prepare and you have to speak for 2 minutes. Remember that you really do need to be able to speak for 2 minutes. It will not be longer, and if you like, you can choose to end your talk before 2 minutes, but this is a bad idea and might affect your score in a negative way. So let's just remind you of a few example topics, and I think these are new ones compared to other videos on the speaking. So here are some new examples for you. A kind of transportation that you often use, a song or piece of music that you listen to, an intelligent person that you know, and a party that you attended. So of course the examiner will give you these topics and you need to talk about them for 2 minutes. So let's talk about tips and strategies. Now, the biggest problem that candidates have is they often say to me, well, I don't know what to say. I have no idea what to talk about. So I'd like it. So I think the best place to start is with some tips and strategies about what to say. And here are my suggestions here. So the first thing you can do is use WH words as triggers. Now, of course, these are the WH words: what, where, who, why, when, and how. They are the most useful things. And of course, these are going to give you some ideas. Now, the WH words, remember that you should try and think of 2 or 3 points for each one, especially why. For example, if you use why and you give a reason, well, one reason is not going to give you much. But if you can think of 2 or 3 reasons, then you've got lots of ideas there. But these are only triggers, and if you go through what, where, who, why, when and how, and you still need more ideas, the next thing you can do is you can talk about another one. So we looked at the example just before of a party that you attended. So you can talk about one party, and then you can talk about another party. And of course, when you do this, you can use the WH words again for the second party or the second topic that you're talking about. So with this strategy, you've simply doubled the amount of things that you can talk about. Now, there is another strategy you can use for getting ideas, and I call this stretching. So this is about going wider, and you don't need to feel so limited by the topic. Stretching is about discussing other related topics. So with this example, I've got transportation. If you're talking about transportation, you can stretch it into tourism, maybe car mechanics, maybe you have a story of an experience you had at the airport, something like that. Anything that comes to mind that is related in some way to your topic. Now, you should do these in order. So for example, the WH words to directly address the topic, what, where, who, why, when and how, is the first strategy you go to. And stretching is the third strategy, the final strategy. So you would use this strategy for maybe the last 45 seconds or so of your part 2 talk. If you do that, then obviously by beginning with the WH words, you are directly answering the examiner's question. So if you do decide to stretch, it's okay because you've already covered the topic before. So having said all this, it's important to remember that the 1 minute preparation is really important. Don't throw it away. Even if you know that the topic is easy and you feel confident about talking, don't start early. Use that 1 minute. Because who knows, you might think of some more interesting ideas. You might think of some really great vocabulary you can use. And there are no bonus points for not using that 1 minute preparation time. So you must use it. It's really important and really useful for you to improve your performance in part 2. Okay, so I've got a mind map now. Let's just look at this mind map, because you can see how powerful these simple strategies for getting ideas actually are, especially when you break down your ideas into 2 or 3 points. So in this mind map, I've got a movie that I watched recently, and let's imagine that you chose The Hobbit, the third movie in the Hobbit series there. So you can see actually there are only 4 WH words that are being used. Why did I see it? Who was in the movie? Where was the movie filmed? And how did I feel about the movie? And then breaking it into more detail, well, there are 1, 2, 3, 4 reasons why I watched the movie. There are 2 people in the movie that I want to talk about. And I can talk about what I liked, what I disliked about those 2. And then where, you've got 2 points there. How did I feel? There were good points and bad points. Again, breaking the good points down into 2 or 3 points there. So hopefully this little mind map can show you how, if you start with something general, you go into specific points and break it down, and that will give you the ideas to talk about there. Of course, when you do your mind map preparation, just use key words. Don't try and write it out as a speech. Okay, so let's look at some examples now, and I've got some bad examples that we'll start off with, and then some stronger examples. So let's look at this one. So the topic is a kind of transportation that you often use, and here is a possible answer. I'll just read this out for you. A kind of transportation that I use is the bus. Why I use the bus every day is because I must go to work every day. My husband uses a car, so I must take the bus. And when do I take the bus? I take the bus every morning from Monday to Friday. And then the bus is a big bus. It has air conditioning. Sometimes the driver goes very fast, and then it takes about 1 hour to get to the office by the bus. I think that's all. So let me just highlight some of the weaknesses. Again, to repeat, this is not a good example. You've got repetition, I must, and then. You've got limited vocabulary and limited grammar there. Also, I think that's all is just the speaker decides to end when the speaker wants to. What you should be doing is you should be speaking until the examiner stops you. So let's see if we can improve on this with this example. All right. Once again, the topic is a kind of transportation that you often use. So I'll read this one out to you. Unfortunately, I have to take a bus every day of the week. This is because we only have 1 car which my husband uses. My commute to the office usually takes just under an hour, although it depends upon the traffic. As long as I can get a seat, it is comfortable enough, because I can either catch up on some sleep or listen to some music on my mobile device. However, some days the bus is jam-packed and I have to stand the whole time, making the journey a 1-hour nightmare. On those days, I arrive at the office ready to scream at the slightest provocation. So let me highlight some of the positive features in this. These are underlined here, so we have some interesting vocabulary: commute, catch up on, mobile device, jam-packed, nightmare, slightest provocation. And I talk throughout about this IELTS course of using interesting vocabulary. If you need to get a high score, you have to use interesting vocabulary, just like in these examples. In this example, there's also a useful way of the speaker joining ideas. So this is because, although it depends on, as long as, that kind of thing is really useful. So there we have it. There's a few examples. These examples are not full 2-minute samples, but I think they do illustrate the difference between what a good response and a weaker response is in part 2 of the speaking. So let me just summarise this for you. The good score, you will give details and you will be specific about the experience you are describing. You will use interesting vocabulary, so keep on developing and growing your vocabulary. You will speak at a good pace, no pauses or hesitations. So by this I mean like that. And of course you'll make fewer grammar errors. And then the bad or the weak scores is general ideas which have lack of detail, speaking slowly, too many pauses, hesitations and repetitions, and making grammar mistakes. Okay, so that's how you need to answer the part 2 in speaking. Now let me give you some tips, because again it's all down to practice. So if you practice part 2, then you will get much better. Here's how to do it. So remember, it doesn't take much time. You're only asked to speak for 2 minutes here. So just remember that a bit of practice in part 2 will only take 5 or 10 minutes of your day. Here are the steps then. First thing is choose from the sample topics. Now in this video I've suggested some topics, and in other videos you can get more topics. Of course there are other part 2 topics available that you can find in IELTS preparation books, on the internet and so forth. So get a list of part 2 topics you can practice with. Then, of course, take 1 minute to prepare, and remember to use the tips and strategies for getting ideas that I talked about. And then number 3, you can speak for 2 minutes. So you'll need to have a timing device ready so that you can see how time is going, and to make sure that you do fill those 2 minutes. You can do this alone if you're shy, or of course you can have friend or family member to be your listener. And then step number 4 is to record those 2 minutes talks. So use your laptop, use your phone, and record your performance, because it's really important that you listen back and you evaluate your performance. Once you're listening back, you can ask these questions. What words did I get stuck for? What grammar mistakes did I make? How can I correct my mistakes? And then, once you've answered those questions, maybe you can look in the grammar books, maybe you can check some vocabulary. You must repeat that talk though, because by repeating it, then you're making step-by-step improvements on those part 2s. And you should do this process several times. Remember to do as many topics as you can, as many times as you can. Talk about the topic until you get bored of it, really, so that you're delivering that part 2 talk with confidence and fluency. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. They are some useful tips for part 2 of the speaking test. And of course there is another video about part 3 of the speaking test, and you can go on and look at that if you wish. Thank you.